Hey, look at this little all-in-wonder. Yeah, I said wonder. It's the EF600 from our friends at Hifiman. It's a DAC. It's a headphone amp. It's a headphone stand. It's got integrated USB. What doesn't it do? Well, we'll find out maybe. Yeah, it's this cool form factor. You don't commonly see this form factor. I'm not saying it's the only and exclusive ever one, but you know, we're very accustomed to these short, squatty black boxes for all our amplification and DAC form factors. So nice to see one that like does a thing. Look at that. It holds headphones. It holds them well. It looks pretty good doing it. I think this guy MSRP is around 700 bucks. I like a lot of Hifiman headphones. I haven't tried a ton of Hifiman amps or electronics or accessories, so a little new territory for me there, but I've tried a ton of their headphones and I'm a pretty big fan. I think they often nail that like value for dollar bracket really well when compared. So I was excited to check this thing out. Let's do quick kind of physical stuff, build stuff. So the headphone stand is super handy. I enjoyed that a lot. It does get warm. So if you live in a cooler climate, great. Heated ear pads. If you live in a warm climate, a little bit clammy. Not terrible though. On the back side, what I do like is they include a USB-C, not just the, what's this, USB-B or A? I can never keep them straight. But not just this clunky old printer jack, but also a cable I might have in this day and age. This is a little screw-on antenna for the USB. You've seen those sticking up. It looks kind of goofy. And then you've got your balanced XLR in, RCA in, and then out RCAs and out balanced. So you can use it as a preamp from the internal DAC, as well as from a source if you want, or two sources. So very cool there. And here's the issue number one. The power switch, and these aren't, you know, uncommon to use this lockup of fuse, power switch, and power inlet, is located in the back, and it's not super obvious to like reach around and find it, which is strange for a device like this that's so thoughtful about the front user experience. So a little ding there, but not the end of the world. The other thing is that some of these inputs are pretty high up, so like when you see this thing all corded up, it's got a bit of a like dreadlock vibe going on the back, and if it's up high on your desk, it's not the coolest look, but again, these are little niggles. I like, oh, it's got this nice little rubber pad, so it feels good. It's heavy enough that it really grips, like when you're putting your headphones on and off. It's definitely not like slipping around on you, so feels very, very solid in that regard. The volume knob is a bit love-hate for me here. It's this little rectangle I tacked on the front, so I appreciate the novelty. It's nice to see different things. Across the room, I guess maybe it's kind of easier to see, but also not, because you wouldn't necessarily know which side is up. I found that I think I'm more of a circular volume knob kind of guy, and just in that it's a little easier no look to kind of reach over and grab a circle and twist it, whereas this thing you kind of had to pay attention what angle you come at it. Again, pretty small niggles, but that's what I'm here for, to whine and complain about things. You've got your balanced out and your standard 1/4 inch single-ended as well. And then on the front, you know, your buttons here, you've got high and low gain, and you've got non-oversampling and oversampling. I preferred low gain, non-oversampling when the headphone would support it, and high gain when it wouldn't. Didn't really like the oversampling sound profile. You can switch here between USB and coax for your digital input. If you go to Bluetooth, every time I went to Bluetooth, my computer, which is a Mac laptop, would think it was a keyboard and would try to do like a keyboard pairing, so that was very annoying. I'm sure there's some way to make it stop happening, but kept happening every time I cycle through RCA and balancing. Anyway, kind of clicky, you know, doesn't feel super spendy, but hey, guess what? It's not super spendy. In fact, there's kind of a lot of stuff in here at said price. Tried it with a bunch of headphones and compared it to a bunch of amps. So first, just sort of thinking about the amp section alone, did balanced in from my reference DAC. So I was comparing the two amps against, you know, similar source or theoretically identical source. I found the presentation to be pretty powerful, pretty strong. It's got a fluidity to it. It's got a thickness to it. When I compared it against some of my reference amps at much higher and slightly lower price points, all in the sort of solid state camp, I found that maybe it was a little bit less punchy, a little less energy, a little bit less dynamic than some of the other amps, especially in the upper register. Doesn't quite have that same like snap of some solid state amps I had on hand to compare it to. And so when you take a song like Lose Your Love by the Dirty Projectors, which is very crisp and tight, on one hand, on some of the other amps, it's just jumping out of the headphones at you. But on this amp, you get a little bit more of an approachable sound, almost a little more human of a sound. The vocals feel it just a twinge more natural or softer in a good way. So it's not as simple as saying one is better or the other's better. It's a bit about preference. I will say it wasn't able to dig down quite as deep as some of the other amps I was comparing it to. Didn't push or drive down as deep, and that wasn't even about demanding headphones. It was just sort of across the board, and like a little bit less depth or space in the sound. I felt like it was a little bit of a closer in, a little bit more intimate listen. So this is Sisvara. Hifiman shows a lot of marketing images with the Sisvara on here. As we know from past videos, this Sisvara, it does look good on here though. Yeah, silver, black. The Sisvara is no easy. It's no walk in the park, right? No easy headphone to drive. It's got a 60 ohm impedance. It's 83 dB efficient, which means it's not efficient at all whatsoever. And beyond that, even throwing gobs of power at it doesn't always work. Sometimes you got to throw the right gobs of power at it to really get the most out of it. A lot of people complain about that. It's a very expensive headphone. Why do I have to spend so much money on an amp? I'm sorry, you don't. But if you want the magic, you do. Anyway, so the Hifiman makes a headphone, the EF1000, that's designed, as I understand it, for the Sisvara, and it cost $18,000. It's a 2-chassis affair with tubes and solid-state hybrids. It's crazy. Anyway, this guy, back on task, this guy has a reported little over 5 watts per channel balanced out. That's nothing to shake up something. I don't know. That's a lot of power for a headphone amp. So how does it do with this Sisvara? You know what? It does a really admirable job. I've been fortunate enough to hear these headphones on a ton of amps, like dozens of amps. I have a lot of opinions about when they sound good and when they don't. And I gotta say, like, this thing for a $700 amp did a really good job. Now, is it the best? No. It's a little, sus feels a little slower, a little less articulate, a little flatter. Bass isn't as deep. It's not quite as three-dimensional. It did have a nice touch of little warmth, though, that I don't always get from the Sisvara. So, I was kind of impressed. That kind of surprised me. So then I went to Hifiman's other incredibly pain in the butt to drive, but very great sounding headphone, the HE6. Closer in price point here, sort of makes a bit more sense. 50 ohm impedance, 83.5 dB efficient. So again, just a total pain in the butt to get good sound out of. And I've also experimented with this guy a lot with a bunch of different amps and speaker amps and all kinds of crazy stuff. And when properly driven, this is an amazing headphone for the money. I was a little bummed coming off the sort of win of the Sisvara. I don't feel like the HE600 quite delivered as sort of where my expectations were. But I came back and revisited this without that direct comparison a day or two later, and while I think this is a little more congested on this amp than some of the best amps I've heard it on, and there's not quite as much detail, and there's certainly not quite as much dynamics. For less complicated music, for stuff that didn't have gigantic dynamic swings or 1,000 instruments at one time, it was really nice just just really sweet and detailed and beautiful to listen to. So kind of a cool combination, especially when you consider the all-in price. So that's the amp. Let's talk about the DAC for a sec. The DAC, it is, you know, an R2R ladder DAC. It's a ladder on chip that is, I believe, Hifiman's own, called the Himalaya. Oh, yes, they have a sticker. It's a very full, luscious presentation. I think it's like what you think of in your mind is like, oh, what's an R2R DAC going to sound like? I think it kind of delivers on that promise with a little bit of extra bloom. It's a little bit more crowded. It's not like the most precise and articulate. I've heard very, very good ladder DACs, and I don't think they have to have some of these little compromises to achieve that grace that I associate with ladder DACs and why I love them. That being said, again, those are DACs that are 5-10 times the price of this whole unit, right? And have no amp inside them. So maybe not fair comparisons, definitely not fair comparisons. But it is a pretty nice sounding DAC. But I think what's really interesting here is the synergy between the onboard DAC and the onboard amp, which I really did intentionally listen to them sort of separately to try to understand them, and then listen to them together. And I would have thought it would have been like too much of a good thing, like too warm, too smooth, too rich. But I think they work really well together. They do deliver a very satisfyingly rich presentation, but it doesn't obfuscate from detail. Like, the detail's still there and accessible and enjoyable. Yeah, so that was like kind of the big surprise for me on this thing. So yeah, all in, what's the thoughts? So I think, you know, at its price for what it's offering, it's a pretty compelling package. If you like a warmer, more fluid sound, if you would like an all-in-one solution, if you have limited desk space, if you like this idea of having the convenience of putting your headphones somewhere and not having to worry about them, if you're looking in that under $1,000 territory for a DAC amp combo or two separates, and if you want to have a decent amount of power on hand to be able to play with, you know, harder to drive headphones and give yourself some overhead there, I think there's a lot. I think this checks a lot of boxes, and it's different, which is also so refreshing. It's not the same black box, low and wide across your desk. So anyway, yeah, I got to give Hifiman credit. You know, sometimes they're a little oddball out of the gate with certain things, but I think this combination of things at this price is pretty compelling. So yeah, we'll leave it there. This is Signcraft signing out.